Maria Santos stared at the letter. Her hands trembled slightly. The words seemed impossible. She read them again, then once more. 12 years she had cleaned for him. Edgar Whitman's penthouse apartment. Upper East Side luxury. She knew his eccentric ways, but this was different. This was beyond imagination. The entire estate, valued at approximately $4.2 million, including the Manhattan apartment, investment portfolio, and personal effects, has been bequeathed to you, Miss Santos. $4.2 million. The number felt foreign in her mind, like a language she didn't speak. Maria pressed her fingertips to her temples, trying to stop the spinning sensation that had started the moment Mr. Chen spoke those words in his sterile office 3 hours ago. The lawyer's words echoed in her mind as she sat in her cramped studio apartment in Queens, surrounded by the evening sounds of her neighborhood children playing in the courtyard, the subway rumbling overhead, Mrs. Chen practicing violin through thin walls. These sounds had always been comforting, the rhythm of working-class life that she understood. Now they seemed to mock her, reminding her of the gulf between her world and the one Edgar had inhabited. She looked around her small space. The fold-out couch where she slept, the kitchenette with its chipped countertop, the single window that looked out onto a brick wall. For 12 years, this had been enough. More than enough. It was home. But now, with the weight of Edgar's bequest pressing down on her, everything felt different. Edgar Whitman had died 3 weeks ago at 78, alone in his hospital bed while Maria was visiting her sister in New Jersey. The guilt still gnawed at her. She had promised herself she would visit him if he ever got sick. But when the time came, she had been 200 miles away, helping her sister recover from surgery. She had found out about his death from the building's doorman when she arrived for her regular Thursday cleaning. "Oh, Miss Santos," Jimmy had said, his usually cheerful face somber. "I thought someone would have called you. Mr. Whitman passed away last week." The elevator ride to the 15th floor had felt eternal. She had stood outside his door for 10 minutes, key in hand, unable to turn the lock. When she finally entered, the apartment felt different, not just empty, but somehow smaller, as if Edgar's presence had been the thing that gave it substance. The funeral had already happened. A small, sparsely attended affair according to the obituary she found online. She had sat at his kitchen table, the same table where she had left him cups of tea and bowls of soup, and cried for the lonely man who had died without anyone holding his hand. Maria had expected nothing. Edgar had always been polite but distant, paying her well but never engaging in more than necessary conversation. He had no visitors, no family photos, no signs of a life lived with others. His apartment was immaculate but cold, like a museum of one man's solitude. Yet there had been moments, small things that most people wouldn't notice. The way he always asked about her health when she had a cough, how he left extra money on the counter when he knew her sister was having financial troubles, saying only, "For your transportation costs." The time he had insisted she take home an expensive bottle of vitamins because he had ordered too many by mistake. Now she understood. These hadn't been coincidences. Edgar had been paying attention all along, seeing her struggles even when she tried to hide them. The realization brought fresh tears to her eyes. Now, at 55, she was suddenly a millionaire. The thought felt absurd, impossible, terrifying. The phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. "Miss Santos, this is David Chen from Whitman and Associates." She recognized the voice of Edgar's lawyer. "I wanted to follow up on our meeting today. Have you had time to consider the inheritance?" Maria closed her eyes. feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest like a physical thing. I'm still processing it, Mr. Chen. Why would he leave everything to me? We barely spoke. Mr. Whitman was very specific in his instructions. He said you were the only person who had been consistently kind to him without expecting anything in return. He mentioned that you always asked about his health, brought him soup when he was sick, and that you were the only person who seemed to see him as a person, rather than just a wealthy recluse. Maria's throat tightened. She remembered those moments differently. The day she found Edgar sitting at his kitchen table, staring out the window with such profound sadness that she couldn't help but ask if he was okay. He had looked at her with surprise, as if no one had asked him that question in years. "I'm fine," he had said, but his voice cracked slightly. Just remembering someone. She had made him chamomile tea that day, sitting with him in comfortable silence for 20 minutes before returning to her work. It wasn't calculated kindness, it was just how she treated people. But now she realized how rare that must have been in his world. Double quotes, Mr. Chen, I need to tell you something. Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. I can't accept this inheritance. The silence on the other end of the line stretched uncomfortably. Ms. Santos, I have to advise you that this is an extraordinary gift. With careful management, this money could secure your future, allow you to retire comfortably, help your family. That's exactly the problem, Maria interrupted. My family. Over the next hour, Maria explained her situation to the bewildered lawyer, her voice breaking as she shared details she had never spoken aloud to anyone outside her family. Her son Miguel was 28 and had been struggling with gambling addiction for 6 years. It had started innocently, enough fantasy football leagues with co-workers, occasional trips to Atlantic City, scratch-off tickets from the bodega. But addiction doesn't stay innocent. Miguel had stolen from her savings twice, emptying accounts she had taken years to build. He had forged her signature on a credit card application, running up $8,000 in debt before she discovered it. Worst of all, he had borrowed money from dangerous people, loan sharks, who didn't accept excuses or payment plans. Maria's hands shook as she remembered that terrifying night 2 years ago, when two men had shown up at her door, asking for Miguel. Their cold eyes and quiet voices had told her everything she needed to know about what would happen if the debt wasn't paid. She had emptied her retirement account the next day, handing over $12,000 to protect her son from consequences. He couldn't understand. If Miguel finds out I inherited millions, it will destroy him, she explained, wiping tears from her cheeks. He's been clean for 8 months, working with a counselor, rebuilding his life. I watch him every day, fighting to believe in himself again. But this kind of money, it would be too much temptation. She thought about Miguel's face last week when he had shown her his first paycheck from the warehouse job. Pride, real pride, maybe for the first time since he was a child. He had worked 60 hours that week, his hands blistered and his back aching. But he had earned every dollar honestly. He'd convince himself he deserved a share. Maria continued that he could handle just a little to pay off old debts or start fresh. And once he started gambling again, she couldn't finish the sentence. They both understood where that path led. There are ways to structure the inheritance to protect it, Mr. Chen suggested. Trusts, legal barriers, you don't understand. The problem isn't just access to the money. It's knowing it exists. Miguel would find a way. He always does. Maria's voice carried the exhaustion of years spent loving someone whose disease could destroy them both. And even if he didn't, it would hang over our relationship forever. He'd resent me for having it and not sharing it. He'd see every dollar he earned at his warehouse job as nothing compared to what I was sitting on. It would poison everything. Maria had spent the past 3 weeks thinking about little else, losing sleep as she imagined different scenarios. Each one ended the same way, with Miguel's fragile recovery shattered and their relationship destroyed. She remembered the last time he had relapsed, 18 months ago. She had found him at 3 a.m. in a casino parking lot, broke and desperate, begging strangers for money. The shame in his eyes had nearly broken her heart. But Ms. Santos, you could help so many people with this money, your own future, Mr. Chen. I clean apartments for a living, and I'm proud of that work. Maria's voice grew stronger. I make enough to live comfortably. I have good health insurance through my employer, and I've saved enough for a modest retirement. I don't need millions of dollars to be content. The truth was deeper than that, though she didn't say it. Maria had learned long ago that contentment came from simpler things. The satisfaction of leaving a space cleaner than she found it, the trust her clients placed in her, the small kindnesses exchanged between people who saw each other as human beings, rather than services to be purchased. What about your granddaughter? The lawyer pressed. Surely you'd want to secure her future. Maria thought of Sophia, Miguel's 8-year-old daughter, and felt her resolve waver for a moment. The little girl lived with her mother across town, but Maria saw her every weekend. Sophia was bright, curious, always asking questions about everything. College would be expensive. A trust fund could guarantee her education, her opportunities. But then Maria imagined explaining to Miguel why. His daughter had millions while he had nothing. Imagine the questions Sophia would ask as she grew older. The weight of expectations that kind of money would place on a child's shoulders. No, there had to be a better way. The lawyer tried several more arguments, but Maria had made up her mind. The next day, she met with him to formally refuse the inheritance. What happens to the money now? She asked. According to the will, if you refuse the bequest, it goes to the Riverside Community Center, where Mr. Whitman apparently volunteered many years ago. He specified that it should be used for educational programs and support services for families dealing with addiction. Maria felt a chill of recognition. Riverside Community Center on 145th Street. Yes, do you know it? That's where Miguel goes for his support group meetings. The pieces fell into place with startling clarity. Edgar Whitman hadn't been the isolated hermit she had imagined. Maria remembered now the Tuesday evenings when she worked late. How Edgar would sometimes cancel their sessions, saying he had an appointment. She had assumed it was medical visits or business meetings, but Tuesdays were when the community center held their evening programs. She thought of the times Edgar had asked about Miguel with unusual specificity. Not just how is your son, but is he still attending his meetings, or has he found work yet? She had been touched by his interest, but hadn't questioned how he knew these details. The truth hit her like a physical blow. Edgar had been there. He had seen Miguel struggling, seen him working to rebuild his life, seen the progress and the setbacks as an old man seeking his own form of redemption, perhaps, watching from the back of meeting rooms and understanding exactly what this family needed. Mr. Chen, I think Mr. Whitman knew exactly what he was doing when he wrote this will. What do you mean? Maria wiped fresh tears from her eyes. He wanted to help my family, but he was wise enough to know that direct financial help wasn't what we needed. By leaving the money to me, knowing I would refuse it, he ensured it would go to the place where my son is getting the help he actually needs. The lawyer was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, more personal. You know, in 40 years of practice, I've seen a lot of people make decisions about money. Most of them choose poorly. This may be the wisest thing I've ever witnessed. 2 weeks later, Maria attended the announcement ceremony at Riverside Community Center. The director, Mrs. Rodriguez, struggled to contain her excitement as she explained how the $4.2 million bequest would transform their programs. We'll be able to expand our addiction counseling services, offer job training programs, provide childcare for parents attending meetings, and create a scholarship fund for people pursuing recovery-focused education, she announced to the gathered crowd of clients, families, and community members. Miguel was there, sitting in the back row with other members of his support group. Maria's heart swelled with pride as she watched him, knowing how hard it had been for him to attend these meetings at first. How much courage it took to keep showing up even when he didn't want to. When Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned that the donation came from the estate of Edgar Whitman, facilitated by the selfless decision of someone who chose to put community needs above personal gain, Miguel turned to Maria with confusion. "Mom, wasn't that the old guy you cleaned for?" Maria nodded, not trusting her voice. "Wow, imagine being the person who gave up millions of dollars. They must be either crazy or a saint." Maria felt her throat close with emotion. If only he knew how close that person was sitting to him. Maybe just someone who understood what really matters. Mio. After the ceremony, Maria lingered to speak with Mrs. Rodriguez. The director pulled her aside, her eyes bright with gratitude and something that looked like understanding. "You know," Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly, "Mr. Whitman used to attend our community meetings sometimes. Just sat in the back, never said much. But he always stayed for the whole program, and he always asked thoughtful questions afterward." She paused, studying Maria's face. "He asked about your son specifically once. Wanted to know how Miguel was progressing, whether the family had adequate support." Maria's composure finally broke. The tears she had been holding back for weeks poured out as she understood the full scope of Edgar's plan. He hadn't just been watching Miguel from a distance, he had been invested in his recovery, protective of his progress, determined to help in a way that wouldn't undermine the hard work of healing. Over the following months, Maria watched the community center transform, and with it, her son's recovery strengthened in ways she hadn't thought possible. New counselors were hired, including a specialist in gambling addiction who understood the specific triggers and challenges Miguel faced. A job placement program helped people in recovery find stable employment with employers who didn't judge them for their past mistakes. A child care center allowed parents to attend meetings and counseling sessions without worrying about their children. But it was the scholarship program that moved Maria to tears. Young adults aging out of the foster system, people rebuilding their lives after addiction, single parents pursuing education, all of them now had opportunities that hadn't existed before Edgar's gift. Miguel thrived in the expanded program. The additional counseling sessions gave him tools to manage not just the urge to gamble, but the underlying anxiety and depression that had fueled his addiction. The job training program taught him skills that led to a promotion at the warehouse, then another. Soon he was making enough money to move into his own apartment, to take Sophia to dinner once a week, to start believing in his own future again. One evening, as Maria was finishing her shift cleaning Edgar's former apartment, now occupied by a young couple with a baby, Miguel called her with news that made her heart soar. "Mom, I wanted to tell you first. I'm getting married. Lisa and I have been talking about it for months, and we finally decided. We want Sophia to be the flower girl." Maria sat down heavily on the couch, overwhelmed by the magnitude of this moment. 2 years ago, Miguel couldn't hold a job or maintain a relationship. His addiction had cost him custody of his daughter, his apartment, his self-respect. Now he was planning a future, making commitments, becoming the father Sofia deserved. Miguel, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. I know I put you through hell, Mom, but I want you to know everything you sacrificed for me. All the times you bailed me out when you should have let me face the consequences. It wasn't wasted. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much it meant. After she hung up, Maria cried for 20 minutes, sitting in Edgar's old living room as the sun set over Manhattan. These were different tears than the ones she had shed over his inheritance. These were tears of gratitude, of completion, of understanding that some gifts take time to reveal their true value. One day, as Maria was cleaning the apartment that had once belonged to Edgar Whitman, now occupied by a young couple with a baby, she found an envelope that had fallen behind a bookshelf. It was addressed to her in Edgar's careful handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One day, as Maria was cleaning the apartment that had once belonged to Edgar Whitman, now occupied by a young couple with a baby, she found an envelope that had fallen behind a bookshelf. It was addressed to her in Edgar's careful handwriting, and seeing it made her hands shake with the same tremor she had felt when she first learned of her inheritance. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dear Maria, if you are reading this, then you have made the choice I hoped you would make, though I confess I was not entirely certain you would. I have watched you for years, and I have seen how you carry the weight of loving someone whose struggles could destroy them both. Your son comes to meetings at Riverside twice a week. I have seen him there, working hard to rebuild his life, fighting demons that would have crushed a weaker man. And I have seen the strain in your eyes when you worry about his future. The way you sacrifice your own comfort to give him space to heal. Money cannot cure addiction, but it can strengthen the foundation of support that makes recovery possible. You have already given your son the most important gift: your unwavering love and belief in his ability to heal, even when he could not believe in himself. Now the community that supports him will have the resources to continue that work for years to come, helping not just Miguel, but hundreds of others who walked the same difficult path. You were the only person who saw me as more than a wealthy old man counting down his final days. You saw someone who needed kindness, and you gave it freely, expecting nothing in return. In watching you, I learned that grace is not earned through grand gestures, but through the accumulation of small acts of human decency. You showed me that every day for 12 years. In return, I hope I have seen you clearly, as well as someone who understands that the greatest gifts are not always the ones we keep for ourselves, but the ones we transform into something larger than our individual needs. With deep respect and gratitude for showing an old man what love looks like in action, Edgar Whitman P.S. Check the kitchen drawer where I kept my tea bags. There's something there for you, not wealth, but something I hope you'll treasure more. Maria hurried to the kitchen and opened the drawer. Behind the box of Earl Grey tea was a small velvet box. Inside was a simple gold necklace with a pendant inscribed with the word grace. Attached was a note for the woman who showed me that grace is not something we earn, but something we give and receive through simple acts of human kindness. This belonged to my mother. She would have wanted you to have it. That evening, Maria sat in her small apartment, wearing the necklace and thinking about the strange chain of events that had brought her to this moment. She had refused millions of dollars, yet she felt richer than she ever had before. Her phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. Mom, got another promotion at work. and I've been clean for 1 year today. Thank you for never giving up on me. Love you." Maria smiled, touching the pendant at her throat. Edgar Whitman had been right about many things, but most of all, he had understood that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is not what they want, but what they need. And sometimes, what they need most is for us to trust them enough to let them find their own way to healing, supported by a community that believes in their worth. The inheritance she had refused had multiplied into something far more valuable than money: hope, healing, and the knowledge that even in a city of millions, people could still see each other clearly enough to offer exactly the right kind of help at exactly the right moment. As she prepared for bed, Maria thought about Edgar Whitman alone, in his apartment for so many years, watching and understanding more than anyone had realized. His final act had not been one of charity, but of profound wisdom, the recognition that the most meaningful gifts are often the ones that ask us to be our best selves, not for reward, but simply because it is the right thing to do.